Good day to our dear trainers and teachers. My name is Ayat Prayols from the Bureau of Curriculum Development, representing the English team of the Curriculum Standards Development Division. It is an honor to speak to you about this historical piece of document that took hundreds of stakeholders in a span of several years to complete. We have a lot to tackle, so let's begin. In response to the need for a relevant and responsive curriculum, the BCD, in partnership with the Assessment Curriculum and Technology Research Center, or ACRC, conducted a review of the intended curriculum by examining the curriculum documents and identifying points for improvement. Addressing the findings of the curriculum review has led to the development of what we now know as the Matatag curriculum. In this discussion, we shall focus solely on the languages curricula, which was developed based on the curriculum review of its predecessors, the 2016 Curriculum Guides for English, Filipino, and Mother Tongue. The curriculum review process involved three steps: identifying the essential learning competencies, identifying the cognitive demand of each essential learning competency, and identifying the prerequisite skills across learning areas. The first finding of the review is that there are too many learning competencies. In English, there are 3,120 learning competencies distributed across 12 domains. Here you can see that the domains overlap with one another. For example, if you take a look at this learning competency found in the study strategies domain, interpret simple tables, you will find that it may be subsumed under another domain, particularly writing and composition. Other LCs in study strategies, much like this one, may also be classified under other learning domains. Another example of an overlapping domain is book and print knowledge, which may be clustered together with reading comprehension. Another finding during the review is that there is too much focus on language structure, even in early grade levels in Key Stage 1. Take a look at these learning competencies under the grammar awareness and structure domain. Although knowledge of language structure is important, especially in language learning, literacy development should be emphasized in the first key stage in order to aid content knowledge acquisition in other learning areas, on top of language acquisition. Later, when we take a look at the revised curriculum guides, we will see how literacy is underscored in the language curricula. Given these findings, claims that the intended curriculum is congested is made clear. Particularly, this corroborates findings of ACRC's review of the implemented curriculum. Therefore, what we needed to do next is determine essential learning competencies and distinguish these from what we call desirable learning competencies. To do this, the criteria developed by Reeves and Ainsworth in their attempt to identify power competencies were adopted in the curriculum review, and you will find this criteria in this slide. After reviewing each of the learning competencies in the curriculum guides, and again I'll remind you that we have 3,120 learning competencies, we came up with the graph flashed on the screen. The review elucidates how the desirable learning competencies significantly outnumber the essential learning competencies. This table shows that there are 1,850 desirable learning competencies and only 1,270 essential learning competencies. Throughout the curriculum and across more than half of all the grade levels, the number of desirable competencies is consistently higher than the number of essential learning competencies. This results in curriculum congestion that leads to a lack of time for mastery, a finding that is parallel to that reported by the ACRC in their review of the implemented curriculum. The next step of the curriculum review process entailed identifying the cognitive demand of each essential learning competency. This was done in order to address claims that some LCs are not cognitively appropriate to the level in which they are taught. The table flashed here, which has been provided by ACRC, shows how the identification of cognitive demand was based on Bloom's revised taxonomy. So we have the following: remembers terms, facts, concepts, procedures, relationships, performs procedures and comprehends meaning of different materials, communicates understanding of concepts and relationships, analyzes and synthesizes information, and the most difficult of all, creates and produces outputs based on understanding of concepts. The findings of the review of cognitive demand in the language curriculum guides are illustrated in this graph. As can be seen, there is a significantly high distribution of learning competencies that fall under the second level of cognitive demand, which is performs procedures and comprehends meaning of different materials. And this is found in grades 3 and 4. On the other hand, higher distribution of LCs with higher cognitive demand are seen in the last C stage. However, it can be noted that there are some LCs that are considered misplaced, given their cognitive demand. Consider the distribution of LCs in grade 2, where majority fall under the second to the highest cognitive demand, which is applies concepts, evaluates, and makes connections. Generally, this distribution is acceptable as more lower order thinking skills are targeted by lower grade levels, and more higher order thinking skills are targeted by higher grade levels. The chart flashed on the screen shows the last finding of the review, which is the distribution of prerequisite learning competencies needed by other learning areas from English. As you can see, the learning area sharing the highest number of prerequisites with English is Filipino, with 1,124 learning competencies, followed by Mother Tongue with 298. This finding is not surprising. It is to be expected, since all three subjects fall under the language discipline, hence necessitating the same concepts or skills. It also illustrates how Cummings' interdependence hypothesis, which is the primary theoretical underpinning of the MTBMLE, or the mother tongue-based multilingual education, is translated into the language curricula of the K-12 program. Anchored on the premise that the first language provides the base or foundation of language acquisition, making for easier facilitation of second and even foreign language learning, the competencies of all three subjects work together to attain the goal of communicative competence. Examination of the prerequisite competencies further reveals that the curriculum for arts and PE, mathematics, and health have minimum relevance to English, with 16, 8, and 4 LCs respectively. The result came as a surprise, especially for math, as the subject requires a considerable amount of skill in using English in order to attain certain competencies, such as solving word problems. Even more surprising is the claim that science has zero prerequisites in English, since almost all of the concepts in the subject are expressed in English. In sum, three findings were put forth based on the review of the curriculum, and these are all very significant findings. First, the curriculum was congested. Next, learning competencies were classified through overlapping curriculum domains. And finally, knowledge of language structure was emphasized instead of literacy formation and development. Now, how are all these addressed in the revised curriculum? Let's take a look. Taking into consideration both literature and, of course, the directives that we have in the Department of Education, this has led to the development of a language framework for the K-12 program. This language framework reflects the changes to the language policy and will serve as basis for the revision of the language curricula. We wish to reiterate that the first language serves as the language and literacy resource prior to the introduction and learning of other languages. Language and literacy resource refers to the collective schema or background knowledge of young learners, such as language and experiences, society and culture, prior education and learning, both informal and formal, media, and conditioning at home. Now, we understand the process of learning multiple languages, or the multilingual nature of learning is both simple and complex. It is simple in the sense that to support literacy and language development in an additional language, if there is an understanding of comparable skills across these languages, then teachers and students can make connections between the respective languages and in the ways in which language is used to make meaning in different contexts, in different forms, and for different audiences. However, and at the same time, it is important to note that learning an additional language is not a matter of straightforward transfer. There is no straightforward transfer of cognitive or academic or literacy-related proficiency and linguistic and cultural understandings. Learning an additional language to manage academic learning is complicated, and it takes considerable time. An awareness and understanding of similarities and differences in underlying attributes, however, enables students to use and expand their funds of knowledge as they learn to read, write, speak, and listen in one or more languages. Multilingual learning involves both building on what has previously been learned in one language as a foundation for learning in another language, and then using that learning to further extend learning in the original language. This complex process is encapsulated by the co-tangential circles in the framework, as they show that one language, usually in the smaller circle, or the combination of both, usually involving the mother tongue as a language and literacy resource, may serve as the foundation of learning another language. That's usually in a bigger circle. Upon development of this language framework, we now went on to develop the curriculum framework, which will serve as a blueprint for the revision process. The aim of the language curriculum is to produce young Filipino learners who are literate and communicatively competent in their first language and in the English language. Knowledge in and of the mother tongue shall serve as resource for learning Filipino and English in order to learn through those languages and eventually contribute productively to their community and to the larger society as multilingual, multiliterate, and intercultural citizens of the country who have a deep sense of cultural identity. This beautiful aspiration is broken down into the following goals of the subject, which are, first, literacy, or the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, communicate, and compute using printed and written materials associated with varying contexts. Literacy entails active engagement with language to acquire, construct, reconstruct, and communicate meaning. Communicative competence, or the synthesis of knowledge of grammatical, sociolinguistic, discourse, and strategic competencies in the language. Cultural identity, or the feeling of pride in belonging to a cultural group that is fully accepted and appreciated by all other cultural groups of the nation. This sense of pride and belongingness contributes in part to one's self-conception, self-perception, and position of equal standing in society. In order to attain these lofty goals, the language curriculum, its delivery through pedagogy and assessment, should be informed by sound theories on language acquisition and learning and should be influenced by the learner's culture and context. Therefore, contextualization through the meaningful inclusion of local culture, which includes knowledge systems, belief systems, literature, mores, and norms, play a key role in the successful implementation and assessment of our new language curriculum. The language curriculum is also guided by three organizing domains of the big ideas, which are literacy, language, and text. In order to achieve the curriculum goals that we have set for our learners, it was not enough that we simply identify essential learning competencies. Our process had to be guided by what we call big ideas. The big ideas in the language curricula are clustered into three domains, as seen on this slide. We have literacy, language, and text. Each domain has distinctive goals, body of knowledge, and skills, but each, as you can see, interweaves with the others, making them interdependent. The three-domain curricula of the language areas provide a rich resource for learning in other fields, not just in the languages. They can also learn through these big ideas, mathematics, science, and social studies. These big ideas contribute to the needed literacy requirements in these fields and support the development of academic reading, writing, viewing, speaking, and listening, as well as assisting the learner to communicate socially and culturally with confidence. knowledge of the nature of language and culture in L1 and L2, alongside an understanding of the ways language is used in different contexts, equips learners with the expressive means to construct and understand texts for different purposes. One thing to note regarding the big ideas in the language curricula is that the domain and focus shifts as the learner progresses across key stages. One of the major changes in the design of the language arts curricula is the dynamic nature of the big ideas, which again shift in focus across key stages. In key stage 1, as you can see, the main focus is on literacy formation and development through the vehicle of language macro skills as used in meaningful, developmentally, and grade-level appropriate text. In key stage 1, we aim for 70% narrative text and 30% informational text. Therefore, only those that support literacy development are deemed essential in this key stage. Our target skills by the end of Key Stage 1 is that learners are able to use all of their language repertoire, including the mother tongue and Filipino, along with English as a second language, appropriately and effectively in oral, visual, and written communication in a variety of situations and for a variety of audiences, contexts, and purposes, including learning of other content subjects and languages. Our learners should also be able to demonstrate appreciation of various forms of literacy and literary texts, and take pride in one's cultural heritage. By Key Stage 2, the main focus of the curriculum is to help learners use their basic and critical literacy skills, which have been developed in Key Stage 1, in using the language through receptive skills, expressive skills, and viewing, using meaningful, developmentally, and grade-level appropriate text. By Key Stage 2, there should be a 50-50 focus on narrative and informational texts. Therefore, only those learning competencies that support literacy in the applied level and language development or communicative competence shall be deemed essential in this key stage. By the end of Key Stage 2, we want our learners to be able to use their basic and critical literacy skills in all of the target languages, including mother tongue Filipino and English, in learning the language and achieving communicative competence, in order to appropriately and effectively engage in a variety of situations and for a variety of audiences, contexts, and purposes, including learning of other content subjects, demonstrate an appreciation of various forms of literacy and literary texts, and take pride in one's cultural heritage and broadening identity. Finally, in Key Stage 3, you will find that the main focus is learners' literacy skills and their knowledge about the language, as well as the ability to evaluate and produce a variety of texts, including listening, oral, written, and multimodal texts that will help them express their ideas, concepts, and express meaning from developmentally and grade-level appropriate themes and topics. By this key stage, we would like learners to be exposed to 70% informational texts and only 30% narrative texts. Therefore, only those learning competencies that support text evaluation, composition, and publication, using the learner's literacy skills and communicative skills, shall be deemed essential in this key stage, where the primary focus is on text skills. By the end of Key Stage 3, we want learners to be able to use their literacy skills, basic, critical, and applied literacy, and communicative competence in all target languages in evaluating, composing, and publishing a plethora of texts, including listening, oral, written, and multimodal texts, as used for various audiences, contexts, and purposes, and in various content areas to demonstrate appreciation of various forms of literacy and literary texts, and show pride in one's cultural heritage and broadening identity. The Languages Curriculum Guide has also made explicit the literacy focus across all key stages. Language and reading and literacy, which are the new subjects introduced by the Matatag curriculum, shall be offered starting grade 1 and shall primarily develop the learner's oracy and literacy in the first language. These subjects shall serve as the basis in transitioning the learner's oracy for literacy to Filipino and English. Oracy for literacy is the ability to use relevant oral language elements like phonological awareness, vocabulary, and listening capacity to develop basic or beginning literacy. Basic literacy, another target in Key Stage 1, refers to the skills used for the initial learning of reading and writing, and it's developed from the third to the fourth quarters of grade 1. Filipino and English shall be offered simultaneously starting grade 2, and these subjects shall primarily develop learners' literacy. The curricula for both languages shall be mother tongue based, as oracy and literacy skills in the first language serve as the foundation in transitioning learners' oracy for literacy to Filipino and English. Basic literacy shall be developed in both languages until grade 3. Filipino and English shall continue developing and enhancing learners' communicative competence and applied and critical literacy skills from grades 4 to 6. Applied literacy is the ability to think about particular ways of doing reading and writing with the purpose of achieving communicative goals in a socially appropriate manner, while critical literacy is a critical thinking skill that involves the questioning and examination of ideas and the skills to synthesize, analyze, interpret, evaluate, and respond to texts. It is the ability to evaluate the veracity of information and make connections and judgments of the relevance of information. Finally, by the third key stage, both learning areas shall contribute to the development of learners' communicative competence and multiliteracies, or the ability to understand information and the design of meaning through the manipulation of individual modes, linguistic meaning, visual meaning, audio meaning, gestural, tactile, and spatial meaning. In this slide, you will find the different learning subdomains for each key stage. The shifting big ideas and the literacy targets are reflected in the key stage standards and the learning subdomains for each key stage, as you can see in both this slide and the previous slide. You may pause this video so you can better examine how these curriculum standards, along with their learning subdomains, align with the learning area standard and the curriculum goals of the subject, with the help of your facilitator. Then, further relate these standards with the grade level standards targeted in your respective sessions. Now it's time for you to take a look at the curriculum guide for the level you're assigned to. Your facilitator will clarify any and all questions that you may have regarding the curriculum review process, its findings, and the shape of the new curriculum guide for the languages. Then you shall proceed to further understanding the structure and content of our curriculum guide by examining the document. I wish you all good luck in this very important activity. Remember, the curriculum is only a document. It is you, our teachers, who will bring it to life in the classroom. We cannot actualize the curriculum goals without your expertise. So I hope you all do your best para sa bata. Maraming salamat po.